Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and today we're back with another build guide video. This is updated for, of course, the 1.2 new artifacts which came out, which I think probably will contend for her best in slot. But you know how we always do this test? Let's start off with a bit of a kit information, and we'll go deeper into her best comms as well as relics, Lightcones, and stuff like that. So overall, what makes Bronya very special? There are a few things about her. The simplest one is, of course, her single target basic attack here is a guaranteed crit to land because of one of her major tracers. But her trademark ability is going to be her skill, which pushes up a character to immediately take their turn. So as you can see here, Natasha has like 34 turn units available. Once I press E and click here, you can see immediately Natasha is next to go with E0. Of course, this skill is not able to be used on herself. If I click on her, for example, notice that there's no difference here in the packing order. She still takes like 41 turns to go as well. So that is one of the major differences about Bronya. When she's using the skill on herself, it does state it in here. You can click the ability here. You can see you can't like have infinite turns on herself. That is one thing to note. It gives a good damage buff, immediately push, so it doesn't matter like how slow the unit is, very strong, and is what makes Bronya very effective, and why she doesn't really care too much about basic attacking and dealing damage, because most of the time you will want her to use her skill, push up a unit, and let them do a lot of damage. Her ultimate ability here is just increasing of attack percentage for your whole team, as well as giving more crit damage based off scaling off of Bronya's crit damage as well, which is why she's a character that does like to build a little bit more into crit damage, not so much crit rate as well. So that is like just some things to talk about. Okay, now and just real quickly, I'll show you what the damage buff looks like. Let's take a look at Natasha here. She has about 93% crit damage as well as plus 419 attack. So I'm just going to go ahead, press Bronya's out. So as you can see, it does scale nicely here, about 300 plus increase and also about 40 crit damage increase for my current stat ratios on Bronya. So that is pretty nice to have. It also buffs her own crit damage, which means her basic attack will do a little bit more for those of you who are wondering as well. It scales off crit damage. Bronya likes a bit more crit damage, and we will reflect that in our build, which we are going to talk about right now. So first things first, let's jump into the new relics and what I'm using and what I think is like the best out of all of them. In my opinion, like these two are probably going to be Bronya's best in slot sets, in case any of you are wondering, in 1.2 as well. I think it's very strong because not only do you give her a bit more effect resistance to resist some control, you know how many characters somehow always get targeted, so having like 30% effect rest is quite nice. Crit damage, she benefits from it and is also the same type buffing your whole team of crit damage, very in line with her kit. I think Broken Kill likely will be a best in slot. As you can see here, I'm using actually a 4-piece energy restoration rate or recharge rate, just to give a bit more uptime on her burst ability as well. Although it's like 4 stars, I still use it because the main stat is correct, so I don't mind. Other than that, I'm using a HP percentage for her Planisphere, and boots, I'm running a speed boots, I'm running a crit damage surcelet or body, I'm running an attack, just looking for like speed and effect resistance for stuff like that. Crit damage and speed all works fine. I don't mind building her a little bit more chunkier. As you can see, I do have a decent amount of HP, decent amount of defense, just to make her a bit more survivable. And as you can see here, I'm stacking a lot of speed to this character. She does benefit a lot from speed because the more she acts means she can push up your DPS, who's if you are like running maybe a attack percentage boot, it's going to be a little bit slower. What I like to do is I like to make Bronya always faster than the DPS. That is one thing that I always want to know, because the more turns Bronya takes, she can just simply press her skill, push up the DPS real quick. So that is one thing that I want to talk about. Other than that, let's talk about the other new set before we dive into the rest of the other options as well. I'm using the Messenger Traversing Hackerspace. I think this is also solid. You can run a 2-piece here, and if you don't have the resources, you can run something else in the other 2-piece, but I like this 4-piece a lot, especially when she casts her ultimate. You buff everyone's speed by 12%. Her ultimate is buffing your teammates, so you do proc this ability as well. So that 12% speed is very beneficial for the entire party, especially when you combine with other Lightcones that are like, for example, stuff that push you up like dance. I think it's really solid. It's the only one that buffs the team currently, a 4-piece that is meant for a support, which is why I think this is likely going to be a best in slot moving forward. So now they talk about like some of the main stats I'm using and the new sets already. Let's talk about the rest of the relics before we go into the Lightcones that I think will be very synergetic with this build. I always like to use this synthesis menu because it's always very easy to see the other options. As we can see here, I think that this is probably her best in slot. You probably won't be wanting to break effect units as well. You probably don't care too much about wind damage, unless maybe you want the 4-piece when you use the ultimate ability to action advance 25%. But to rely on this ultimate ability, this is like more or less not very important because of the wind damage bonus. This gives you like flat speed and team-wide speed, which is really a Harmony character's embodiment of a Harmony character's objectives, which is you are trying to like provide more team support to the entire team. So this one, not maybe like second or third priority, not as useful. This is also okay because it gives you the basic attack damage, which is what she does. Speed increased by 6%, which is found here in this 2-piece as well. So maybe some of you haven't found this, or your better gear is left for your other characters. I would suggest this would be like your second option that you can take. Other than that, of course, Guard of Wuthering Snow is definitely still very versatile. Probably I'll rank this as even on Messenger Traversing Hacker Space. Depending on your comms, I do see this still as quite relevant. Reduces damage taken, it gives you a bit of sustain, especially if you're running like Bruiser comms, which takes damage throughout your team. This could still see quite a lot of play, and I will still rate it as quite good. Probably the best out of the others in terms of currently 1.2 meta game state as well. HP, nice to have, 2-piece. A lot of the other 2-pieces are okay, I guess. But I do think these 2 sets likely will reign supreme. As for the other sets, if you are going for specifically crit damage buffing, a lot of you might be looking at this and wondering, is this going to be better? But this 16%, note that it takes 60% of Bronya's, so that 16% multiplied by this is definitely way less than what you get over here in this 10%. So Celestian Differentiator is a clear inferior to Broken Kill in terms of buffing crit damage. The only time that is better is if you are building like a Bronya for a DPS, but I don't think that 6% justifies losing out this 10% for the rest of the team. Of course, you can't just compare it just like that. One thing to note is you do have to build quite a lot of effect rest stat in order to get this 10%. Although Bronya does have quite a lot of minor traces that gives her a lot of effect resistance, I think it's like 10 to 12%. So really you just need like 2 rolls of effect rest and you can proc this 10% crit damage for Bronya. That's why this is like super strong. Other than that, we talked about this, not as useful. I like Sprightly Von Wack, gives a bit of energy regeneration rate. You push her up immediately moving forward. This is also nice, but it's only like once per battle. Memory of Chaos is like long drawn out fights, so you don't really get the full value out of this. Fleet of Ageless definitely is also another option that you can consider, but we already talked about the difference between Fleet of Ageless as well as Broken Kill in another video, which I'll link in the video cut above for those of you who are interested. Generally, I would say Bronya won't really play into attack percentage based comp. She'll much rather prefer a crit damage based comp for most teams, but there are some teams where you would want to run an attack percentage based comp as well. This one not very useful for her. Other than that, I think it's more or less the same. She doesn't debuff. So definitely I would say Broken Kill as well as Sprightly Von Wack will be my top 2 picks in general for Bronya in terms of relics. Now let's talk about the next interesting thing, which probably is going to be Lightcones. Let's go into the database menu, which we can see everything all at once. I think it's like much more clearer to see everything all at one go. Okay, so let's start with like the best and go all the way down, and I'll give you the different situations in terms of which one you would consider in different situations, because for Lightcones, for Harmony characters, there is no clear best in slot. There's just one that is like more versatile than the others. Of course, but the battle isn't over. Her own Harmony Lightcone. This one is very strong, gives her energy restoration rate, gives her 1 skill point regeneration when you use the ultimate. Of course, it has a cooldown of like 2 users of ultimate, so like kind of like a 33% uptime, so to speak, or 33 or 50%. I don't have this, so I can't test this out. If any of you know how this exactly works, this function, whether it counts on the current one or maybe would you just need one more to get it back, do leave us a comment in the comment section below. I'm sure a lot of us will be happy to read and understand it too, much clearer. And when a wearer uses a skill, you have an increased damage of 30% for the next ally. This works very well with Bronya because she immediately pushes the next one up, so you don't even have to care too much about speed tuning your characters and stuff like that. Very, very useful as well. For those of us who don't have this, the other one that we can consider will be, no, not this one. I think it's Past and Future, if I'm not wrong. Yes. So this one is also really good, the one with Yukong's profile picture here. When you use a skill, you also get a 16% damage increase. For those of us who have it at max level, it's more or less the same as the Bronya's Lightcone. You also get it 32%. This is in a situation where you're running like maybe a hyper carry of a different element, then this will make more sense because you still get a universal 32% increased damage. When you are running the same element, for example, maybe you have Blade in your roster already and you're maybe running Wind, this is definitely going to be a lot better because you will generally buff across the board. Many characters win damage bonus as well. So this one is also very strong, especially if you're running same type elements. Planetary Rendezvous likely will reign supreme in a lot of team compositions that is of mono element or same as Bronya wind element. Other than that, we talked about these two and the differences between them. Dance I think is probably the most universal Lightcone of all of them. When you just press the ultimate, all allies action advance by 24%. Super solid, especially with like Messenger of Hackerspace, you get the additional 12%, so you let them move for their turns even faster. Very nice to just cycle through your entire roster. As we all know, more turns means that we are able to clear the Memory of Chaos faster. That's why this is such a broken thing, because it's just a flat out 24%, super strong as well. Together with her skill, you do find yourself lapping through the Memory of Chaos very quickly. Other than that, we talked about this tree, so let's talk about the Battle Pass one next. This one is just a random amount of effect that's buffed, either buffing attack, crit damage, or energy regeneration rate. Bronya can use all three. Of course, maybe slightly attack is not as important compared to the other two, but still, your teammates might be able to use all these three features as well. I think it's pretty strong because a lot of DPSs like Huynh characters might have very high crit rate, so they definitely still do benefit from this crit damage, and everyone would benefit a bit more from energy regeneration rate. This is pretty much like if you don't care too much about speed, maybe your team has like Clara in it, you don't really care too much about moving faster, this is a pretty solid one to have on your roster that doesn't care too much about action advance. And last but not least, for the 4 stars is Memory of the Past. I think this is out of all of them like the lowest priority. You only get an increase in break effect of 28%, and when you attack, you just regenerate more energy. This is nice, but it does require you to stray away from your like skill to buff another team member. I would say that this is probably useful, especially if Bronya is built more as like a break effect kind of character that is maybe a semi-DPS kind of style, then we could consider that being quite useful. But I don't think that many players watching this video starting to build Bronya for the first time will explore that aspect. I think that's more left towards more advanced players who are a bit more adventurous in their build, so I won't elaborate on this as well. So the last three, these three are also still useful. Some of you might think that 3-star Lightcones are not useful. I think this is also still decently relevant, especially if you don't have other options in 4 stars. Maybe you just don't pull that many Lightcones for Harmony characters. This is good, 12% throughout the board. And of course, Mashing Cogs is also really strong, because if most of us will have it at max super imposition like 3-star Lightcones if we are pulling and not like saving up or accidentally like shuffling them into other gear as fodder. You do regenerate like quite a lot of energy from here, either attacks or get hits one time per turn. Most likely Harmony characters will get hit once as long as there's a number of enemies on the field. So I think this is pretty good for good amounts of energy recharge proxy as well. So that is something to note. Mediation, I think out of all of them will probably be like the worst. You enter battle, you increase speed by 20 points. Maybe if you're running through like the simulated universe and you want to clear it faster, this could be useful. Or maybe you're trying to like make a build that you can see the highest speed that you can actually ever get. This will probably still be useful for those kind of special occasions where you try to top max speed and stuff like that. So those are my thoughts for some Lightcones. Now let's jump into, for example, her tracers as well as Eidolons. Not as important, I think. Some of us might be quite familiar with it as of now, of 1.2. As I mentioned previously, Effect Rest, she has 2 nodes here, this one and this one, which gives her a total of 10% Effect Rest, making her work very nicely with Broken Kill. Together with its base of 10%, you really only need like 10% more Effect Rest to get the Broken Kill bonus. She does get win bonus, she does get crit damage here and there. I haven't leveled it up because I don't think it's worth the amount of resources it costs compared to like investing in other characters right now. But definitely, if you do plan to make her a more potent buffer, use her auto attacks, these also do matter quite a bit. As you can see here, I just focus mainly on the ultimate as well as the skill ability. I didn't care too much about the talent as well as basic attack, since I'm using her more as like a damage a buffer more than a damage dealer herself. This one I think is like super strong. When she's on the field, everyone does 10% more damage. This one is also a slight increase in defense. I wouldn't say it's like super important, especially in the Memory of Chaos. Last but not least, this is the one that gives her 100% crit rate increase for her basic attacks. For Eidolons, I don't have any of her Eidolons. I have her at E0, but let's talk real quick about the Eidolons here in case some of you whales have maybe more of these Eidolons. We're using skill, 50% chance of recovering 1 skill point cooldown. I think this is like super strong because it gives you a lot of refund. It means that she becomes less skill point hungry and still super efficient. A bit of RNG involved, but generally across the board, 50% is quite a nice ratio to have too. Next, Quick March. When using skill, the target's speed is increased 30% after taking action, lasting for one more turn. More speed, always good, plays very nicely into a kit. One thing to know is when you have speed manipulation, the order of your units might change. So your speed tuning might be a bit more difficult to handle. But if you don't really play with stuff that require a lot of speed tuning, I think it's fine. For Bronya, as you can see, she has a skill that pushes immediately. So even the Lightcones that require normally a bit of speed tuning don't really care too much about this speed turn order manipulation. As long as Bronya is like moving pretty fast, I think it's going to be quite fine. E4, Take by Surprise. After an ally other than Bronya uses basic attack with wind weakness, Bronya immediately launches a follow-up attack. So this is like super strong. This is similar to like Kafka's follow-up attacks in a sense. Can only be triggered one time per turn, which gels very nicely with her wanting to move faster. So if you have E4 Bronya, likely it will make more sense to build Bronya a bit more for damage, since she does have a follow-up attack damage of 80% and it always crits. So this is pretty nice to have. Works well with like a speed build, and you can shift more towards utilizing her basic attacks and of course her other minor tracers. E6, last but not least, here is a Piercing Rainbow. Duration of damage boost is increased by one turn. Definitely also very solid. How the Bronya changes through her Eidolons is this makes her into a more of a team-wide buffer rather than a hyper carry style, which utilizes her skills longer uptime as well as her ultimate ability buffing the entire team. One of the downsides about Bronya early on without much Eidolons is she's mainly focused on one single character, and you tend to neglect like the other two characters in the roster. This does alleviate some of that. And of course, Take by Surprise here does change her and make her more viable in terms of a damage contributor for the team. But other than that, I don't think E2 is like so-so in my opinion. E1 is probably like her best in terms of value, because you just need one Eidolon more, and this is like quite a huge refund for her main downside of her kit, which is lack of skill points. So very solid Eidolons on this character overall for any of you whales who are just thinking about it. And for Bronya's team comps, I'm just going to go in real quick because there are really like so many team compositions for support harmony characters in general. I think that she works very well with hyper carry DPSs like Zila. You have Jingyuan currently in the game right now. Blade is of course another one that is not pure hyper carry, but it works very nicely with Bronya because of the same wind element typing. So if you think along those lines, like a main hyper carry DPS will work pretty well. Yanqing is of course another one that could be considered in the same vein of these four characters. These are my opinion of characters that work the best. Danheng probably would be like a budget 5-star characters because of his wind typing as well to benefit from Bronya. The main downside of Bronya is she does like to consume a lot of skill points, which means you generally want to run with a skill point surplus character like Natasha, like for example Luota as well, who gives a bit more skill points than they take. Of course Bailu will be similar. Jabhat also could be if you don't want to freeze the enemies too much. These supportive characters work very nicely with a kit. Otherwise, some people are also running a double harmony like character to build like a hyper carry comp with maybe like Tingyun, or you can play like for example with Esther and stuff like that to run like a double hyper carry comp for one particular like hyper carry DPS, stuff like that. And if you found this video helpful, I do a lot of other guides on the channel. Do check out these two other videos, especially this one which is on weakness break, which I think is quite interesting that not many people might think about too. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video.